So we need to get going so we can talk about Book of Numbers today. So welcome. Hey, thanks for coming. Today is February 15th, a red letter day in history for a number of reasons. It was on this day in 399 BC that Socrates was sentenced to death. Socrates, do you remember? Maybe. Was sentenced to death for corrupting the minds of the youth by asking them questions and making them think of different thoughts, and so he later drank the hemlock, sort of speak, as that was the way he was sacrificed himself. It was on this date in 1898 that the battleship Maine blew up in Havana Harbor, which was the U.S. impetus to the beginning of the Spanish-American War, or as Teddy Roosevelt called it, a splendid little war, kind of thing. Remember the Maine was the big thing before remember Pearl Harbor or anything, and so that was a great thing. And actually, we were in an antique mall not too long ago, and Debbie actually found something, a cobalt blue glass thing of the Maine, battleship Maine, and had "Remember the Maine" written on it, which she bought for me, and as you'll see why in a couple of minutes. Why that is significant, why would I care about that? In 1903, the first teddy bear was introduced in the United States, the first teddy bear. In 1932, Eddie Egan won a gold medal in the Winter Olympics in bobsledding, becoming the first and only athlete to win both a gold medal in the Summer Olympics and the Winter Olympics. Wow. He was a boxing gold medalist in the previous 1928 Olympics that year. That was in 1932. And in 1933, an assassination attempt on FDR in Miami, Florida, missed FDR, but hit Anton Cermak, mayor of Chicago, who died as a result of that. That is the same Anton Cermak of Cermak Road, Cermak Groceries, all that, mayor of Chicago, who was assassinated. Not the only one, not the only mayor of Chicago who was assassinated, but he was assassinated, got in the way of somebody trying to kill FDR. The legend is, it's repeated by one of my college, high school history teachers, that after he was struck in the car, before they were even able to get to him, that Cermak leaned over to FDR and said, "I'm happy, grateful that I was able to be here to take this bullet instead of you," to which FDR replied, "So am I." Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But what's really interesting about today is the number of people that were born on this day. There were some famous people born on this day. First of all, it was on this date in 1497 that Philip Melanchthon was born. Philip Melanchthon, for those of you who follow your Reformation stories, Philip Melanchthon was the Lutheran who took over for Martin Luther. Martin Luther's right-hand man, and became the leader of the Lutheran group in Germany after Luther's death. Galileo was born on this date in 1564. 1564, Galileo, the one who said that the earth revolved around the sun and was threatened with excommunication by the church, and then had to recant, say, "No, sorry about that, I was wrong," and then later was proven to be correct. But he was born on this date in 1564. In 1809, Cyrus McCormick was born. Cyrus McCormick, as in McCormick Place. Cyrus McCormick was born on this date in 1809. Susan B. Anthony, famous suffragette, was born on this date in 1820. In 1825, Carter Harrison Sr. was born. Carter Harrison Sr., mayor of Chicago, from twice. He was, I forget his first thing, but he took office a second time in 1893 and made the mistake of opening his door to somebody with a shotgun who shot and killed him in 1893. So he was the other Chicago mayor who was assassinated. If you've read The Devil in the White City, you'll read about Carter Harrison Sr. not to be confused with Carter Harrison Jr., another mayor of Chicago who was not killed in office. Ernest Shackleton was born in this state. Shackleton, the one who went trying to find the South Pole and got stuck and survived. He was born on this date in 1874. John Barrymore, one of the great Shakespearean actors. John Barrymore, brother of Lionel Barrymore and Ethel Barrymore. Great-grandfather, I believe it's great-grandfather of Drew Barrymore, the actress out there today. He was born in this state in 1882. Harold Arlen was born, I mean, it's really big on birthdays today. I don't know, maybe some of these, I don't know. Yeah, Harold Arlen was born in this state, American composer. Does anybody know what, every one of you, everyone in here, I guarantee knows one song that Harold Arlen wrote. Anybody want to guess?
Happy birthday?
No. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, there's a land that I've heard of. I would sing it for you, but, and then there's a slew of great comedians who were born on this date. I won't give you the years, but Harvey Korman from the Carol Burnett show was born on this date. Chris Farley was born on this date. Matt Groening was born on this date, who created The Simpsons, was born on this date. And a little bit, Stephanie, no, not Stephanie, Jane Seymour, not a comedian, but an actress, who was in a Live and Let Die, the James Bond movie, and Somewhere in Time, the movie about Mackinac Island and going back in time, was born in this state. And I think that's it. I can't think of anyone else who's
There was someone born in 1962.
I forgot who that is. This is, yeah, so,
On
that's
this day.
true.
That's true, probably.
In this room.
Sometimes teaches Sunday school.
Yeah, how many are in this
Enrique,
room?
is Enrique's birthday today? Is it
No,
Enrique's
no.
birthday?
He's not in this room, though.
Yes, so, so this is the day that I will discover. I will report back to you next week. This is the day where I discovered the question asked by the Beatles so many years ago, whether Debbie still needs me, whether she still feeds me when I reach a certain age. So yes, today is my birthday. So yay.
Hey,
Happy birthday to me. That's why I know all these different people who were born on this day.
That's why we remember the Maine.
That's why we remember the name.
Are you a comedian?
No,
Oh.
nor am I a genius or an actor.
Okay.
But like Ernest Shackleton, I have been known to get lost. So there is that. There is that kind of thing today. So yeah, so that's.
So how old are you now?
Oh, don't let's go there. I forgot. It's,
The
you know,
Beatles song is When I'm 64.
just
I'm just telling you the Beatles song.
Yeah, yeah.
that's it's a clue. It's a clue. I know. I can't.
Next year's Medicare.
That's right. That's right. I don't know why I should not be this old. What I don't understand is, if I'm this old, it's like I can talk about being in junior high like it was yesterday. But I can't remember sometimes why I got into this room. But I can talk about junior high like it was yesterday, and I can talk about the Book of Numbers as well. How about that for a smooth transition? Is that slick?
Good job.
Yeah. So. We're going to talk about the Book of Numbers today, without any more. All right, we are in the Book of Numbers today. Book of Numbers, or as I like to call it, Pentateuch, part 4 of 5. I remember when we started talking about the Pentateuch, and one of these days I'm going to put together just a single Pentateuch lesson, because that just kind of really just hit me this time, just how the Pentateuch is a single book. The Hebrew title for the book is In the Wilderness. And I think we might get more people interested in reading it if we called it that. In the Wilderness, as opposed to just Numbers. Because those of you who grew up hating math, and I don't know if any of you are, but you can imagine if you grew up hating math, how excited are you going to be about reading a book called Numbers? Sort of stuff. And it's not even the most interesting. You think about the titles of these books; they're not inspired. Okay, so when you think about the Judges, Judges, let's go see what happens. What's going to happen to Judges? That's great. Judges are kings. Okay, Kings, you know what's going to happen in Kings. Okay, but Numbers, you know, it's kind of, but yeah, it's the Hebrew title is called In the Wilderness, and as we go through it, you'll realize that basically it is the story of what happens to Israel in the wilderness. There's a lot of things, but the English title comes from the Greek, probably from the Septuagint. That's what the LXX stands for. Septuagint title arithmoi, due to the counts or census. What's the plural of census? Censuses. There are two censuses, two counts taken of the people of Israel in this book. One at the start of the book and one near the end of the book. One in chapter 21 and one in chapter 26. Where they count the number of people. And so that's where arithmoi, you probably see the word arithmetic in there, the Greek word there, and that's where we get the title Numbers. So when they put the Old Testament together, I don't, you know, whenever they did that, about in 200, why they translated it Numbers in English, I don't know, but that's what they did. So the author, again, mostly Moses, although again with some help. Several times throughout this book, there are some, it says, variation of the Lord said to Moses is in just about every chapter of the book. The Lord said to Moses this. And so it very clearly originates with Moses. All right. But there are later additions. So for example, there are some later insertions. So if you look at chapter 13, verse 11, and I'll just read it to you here. Numbers chapter 13, on the page. 13, verse 11. Okay, now from the tribe of Manasseh, I don't know why that is 13:11. It doesn't make sense. Descendants of Anak, Hebron had been built. Hebron had been built 7 years before, in verse 22, 13:22. The fact about Hebron had been built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt would have been something that would have been added later. Let's see. I thought I had checked these. But you know, in my old age, I forget things. So, you know. I got 93 days where I can take advantage of being old, so I'm gonna make the most of it. Let me see if this next one is gonna work. 27:14. Okay, let's just ignore this for the moment. There are editorial insertions later on where the writer says, up until this day, things have happened, kind of stuff. Okay, so it is attributed to Moses, mostly, you know. So again, mostly Moses is the author. And now let's watch the Bible Project video. All right, so again, you can see, you know, we call it the book of Numbers because Numbers here and Numbers at the end, where in the wilderness is really what the book is about. Okay, so it takes the Israelites from Sinai. Okay, remember where they have the Ten Commandments and all of that. And if you remember, they got the two tablets in Exodus that came down, and they were, the whole golden calf thing happened. So they've already kind of set the pattern that, you know, every time you turn around, these guys are going to start grumbling. Now, keep in mind, this is compressed. This is 40 years is going on here. So it's not like Monday was this one, Tuesday was this one, Wednesday was this one. So there was some time lapse. So, you know, let's give them a little credit. But be that as it may. The outline is pretty basic. There's 3 parts. There is just the preparation for departure from Sinai, that great peak moment where God says, this is how this is all going to work. Okay? And then from Sinai to Kadesh, and then from Kadesh to the plains of Moab. Okay? And then there's spent some quality time there in Moab. All right. What's interesting is, you know, they're talking about how they're supposed to be settled when they camp. right? And again, there's anywhere from, depending on how you figure it, there's anywhere from 500,000 to 2.5 million people wandering along here. Okay, so this is not an easy, simple thing. You wouldn't know it to look at me, but I have actually run a marathon. Let me rephrase that. I finished a marathon. Okay, I participated in a marathon and made it across the finish line. But one of the things that, if you've ever done the Chicago Marathon, you're there with 55,000 of your closest friends, and if you're like me, you start in the back of the pack, okay? Because marathons line up based on how quickly you run. So the faster runners start first, because it makes sense. If you just went in there, if you just let people go wherever they want, there'd be people tripping over people. So you pretty much self-identify what your pace is. Okay, so if you're fast, you start near the front. If you're slow, you start near the back. And so I'm near the back. But what happens is they'll say, ready, set, go. And if you're in the back of the pack, like I was, you stand for 20 minutes waiting for everybody in front of you to go. Okay, it's just, there's a long time you're standing there waiting before your group clears out the people ahead of you that you start going. Okay, just because there's so many of you. So I can imagine that when the people of Israel were, okay, we're gonna start at 8 o'clock in the morning, here we go, that the tribe of Dan, which was the end group, they may not have gotten going until 6 o'clock in the evening, and then they'd be stretched out over a long line and all of that. In fact, when we went to Israel, and Debbie and I went to Israel, there was always, every day our leader would get 2 or 3 or 4 people that would be the tribe of Dan for that day. So we were there with 58 of our closest friends, and I say that, of course they were. But you're on a bus, and I've talked about this before. You're on this bus, and our leader was, he was just like hyper. And we would stop at the place we were going to go, and he would just hop off the bus and take off. And then you had to get 58 middle-aged to older people off of a coach bus. And I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's pretty much like getting off a Southwest Airlines flight kind of thing. It's just everybody kind of goes, and then nobody moves for a long time. But we would have this, and there was always 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people that were the tribe of Dan, that you had to wait, that you were the last people, always keep up the back end. And so this was part of it. So they sat in an order, they camped in a particular order, and then they marched in a particular order when they were traveling through. And it's one of the things one of the things about Moab is when they get there, they want to march through the country, and they say, we want to go through your country. And they say, we're not going to touch your land, we're not going to touch your fields, we're just going to march through your country. And Moab won't let them. And that kind of leads some of the problems with Moab there. Even though Moab is, excuse me, they are distantly related through Lot's kids, I believe. There's connection there, but they still won't let them go through. And then, of course, Moab later, much later, Ruth comes from Moab. But we'll talk about that when we get to the book of Ruth. But again, what does the book tell us? And again, I've repeated this over and over again. The Bible is a book about God. So what does this book tell us about God? Number one, it tells us that that God is a patient and faithful provider. God is a patient and faithful provider. And I'm going to refer to some of the things that are in there. In here, you have the story of the quail, where the Lord provides quail. And he says, people are getting manna every day with the when it's on the ground, kind of like the snow, you can collect it, you can cook with it, eat it. But they get tired of that, and they say, well, listen, we want something else. We want meat. Because, back in Egypt, we had meat. Things were so great back in Egypt. So the Lord says, all right. And basically, he says in verse chapter 11, I'm going to give you so much meat that you're not going to know what to do with. And so, places just quail everywhere. I've never had quail. Has anybody ever eaten quail?
Tastes like chicken.
Tastes like chicken. I've never had it, but I wonder if in the Jewish universe there's some cultural reference to saying, oh well, it's like eating quail kind of thing, because you have this historical thing. I don't know, but somebody find out about that and report back next week. But God is a patient and faithful provider. When they need water, He provides water. When He needs meat, He provides meat. He's providing manna every day. He's a sovereign and providential intervener. Okay, sovereign and providential intervener, especially near the end when they're battling. The younger generation is getting into the nation, or starting to figure out how they're going to attack. You see God intervening quite a bit. A compassionate responder to intercessory prayer. So you remember he told the story about, God has said, that's it, I'm going to just wipe this whole nation out. And Moses said, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. That's a bad thing. And again, a jealous and just God. As you go through there, you see these things about God. Because again, the Bible is a book about God. It tells us something about God. Okay, and we tend to get lost in the details, when in fact the Bible is simply telling us something about God here. And so these are some things that it sees. Some things that, excuse me, I seem to have brought all through the time in the Philippines, there are a couple of guys, Tim and Tom, the two things. These two guys together, like it's like talk about a show. I mean, these two guys together were just showing pills back and forth and diseases back and forth and symptoms back and forth. I'm feeling a little scratchy today. No, I'm good. And the next day, I'm feeling, take two of these, take two of those, kind of thing. And I was fine, cold-wise the whole day, the whole time, until I got home. Then I'm like, okay, or as I'm on the plane. So it could have been something that I picked up on the plane coming home with several hundred of my closest friends on a 12-hour flight coming back. It was 15 hours from Chicago to Taiwan flight out. It was 12 hours flying back. Okay, same flight, same distance, same route, 3-hour difference in the flights. Which I understand headwinds. I get it. I understand the headwinds, tailwinds, and all that kind of stuff. It still seems, I'm still trying to figure that out in my head, though. It's like, if the wind is that hard, aren't you supposed to be flying faster than the wind, kind of thing? Or if you're into I don't know. It's
The Earth's spinning.
pardon me?
You're going with or against the Earth's rotation.
Yeah, but it's the same distance. It's the same distance.
One's rotating towards you, the other's rotating away.
Okay, I'm not buying it.
But you're willing to think about it.
I'm thinking about it. I'm still thinking about it. Kind of thing. It's interesting that the route, I'm off the topic here now, but it's interesting that what the route itself it doesn't just go straight across, it kind of follows the land as much as it can. But we don't fly over Russia. So I think it's kind of interesting. It's like, because you could fly completely over land, get over Alaska and then cross over it, then fly over Russia and then come back out on the land. Almost virtually entirely land, but we don't do that. You don't fly over Russia. For which I'm grateful, don't get me wrong. I'm not, not that I'm plotting what's going to happen if this plane goes down, but, when it's a 12 or 15 hour flight, odd things happen.
Sure.
If the plane goes down, what's going to, but be that as it may. I'm sorry, where was I? So, some things in the book, and a theme, I was coughing, that's what the problem was. Some things in the book, things are just ideas that get explored or explained in a book. One of them, of course, is the holiness of God. holiness of God. Even as we're talking about the arrangement, okay, God is in the center, and the first different, where was it here? Different laws about the ritual purity, kind of repeating that, this understanding, and part of this understanding about ritual purity is just reinforcing the idea that, hey, you are entering into the presence of God. Okay, and this is a big deal. I think making sure that you understand this is a big deal kind of stuff. We've kind of lost a lot of that in our society today when we talk about how, especially in the U.S., how we dress, kind of thing. Okay, so we're like always, we've when I worked for Ford, I remember, going to church, and I would wear a suit to church, suit and tie, the whole thing. And I had, and it was the 80s, and so I had the whole suspenders kind of thing, the Wall Street, the Gordon Gekko look. I had all of that. And then I went to work for Ford in central office. I worked for Ford Credit, the finance division, my whole time, which is why I don't know cars, just so everybody is aware of that. I mean, I talk about working for Ford. I actually worked for Ford Credit. Okay, so I don't know cars. Cars is cars, 17 digits and a bottom line. Okay, but I do know car dealers. I know car dealers, and I know car deals, and I know auto finance, and I can tell you, is this a good, if you show me your car deal, I can go, is this a good deal? I can say, probably not, but because it's an unequal amount of information involved, et cetera, et cetera. Auto finance, all that, how that works, I know that. So I'm going to work for Ford Credit in the central office, the brain hub, right? And I'm thinking, this is great, right? It was the mid-90s, and so I had 8 suits. I had 8 suits, and I was excited because I could finally wear my suits every day. I thought this was going to be great. And I swear, the week before I got there, to central office, they changed to a business casual all the time. I was, and then if you wore it, and I thought, well, you could still wear a suit. You could still wear a suit. It's still fine. But if you ever wore a suit, then all you get people asking you is, you got a job interview?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So it's like, So I would every now and then, but ever after that, it was just kind of like, people looking for a casual day. But part of this is understanding that, you kind of dress, like when people talk about it, you dress for job interview. You dress for the job you want, not for the job you have, kind of thing. But be that as it may, so that's part of this whole ritual purity, is to understand, hey, we dress up for these occasions, right? Nowadays, we dress up for funerals and weddings, and then that's pretty much about it, right? Otherwise, we're pretty casual. But God is saying, hey, holiness of God requires you to wear certain things, to prepare yourself in certain ways. The sinfulness of humanity. Okay, now this is something that you really see in Numbers, as we'll go through some of the stories. It's just a series of, this happened, this, and then, they sinned in this way, and then they sinned in this way, and then they sinned in this way, and then they sinned in this way. We go through the sinfulness of humanity, the necessity of obedience. The necessity of obedience. The tragedy of disobedience. So if you go through there's a lot of these very well-known stories when we talk about Moses. Most of the stories you know about Moses and Israel comes from the book of Numbers. Okay? The tragedy of disobedience. And then the really important one is the utter faithfulness of God to his covenant agreement. Okay, so the fact that the children of Israel made it to the promised land should be a great comfort to us. I mean, they tried their best not to make it. They really did. Okay, but God was faithful to them. So, we can try our best at times to break our relationship with God. But you know what? that God's not gonna let that happen, kind of thing. So what are some of the major passages, and these are not all of them, but just to kind of go through some of the stories. The Lord provides quail. And again, I said the story, the way the NIV translates it in chapter 11, verse 4. The rabble with them began to provide other food. The rabble. Okay, so it's a biblical word. The rabble.
Rabble.
You know, the rabble said this kind of thing. Wanted other food. If only we had meat to eat. Remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost? Also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna, kind of thing. Now, parents, have you ever heard your kids say something like this? Is this all we always eat the same thing? Never make anything. Never. And then that conversation goes, never, I never do anything different. I never do anything different. You know, Moses, verse 10, Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance to their tents. Okay? Wailing at this is over the manna. And again, I mean, eating the same thing every day can get to be a drag. I understand that. I know when I worked in the restaurant business, that was my first career. I'm in my third career. Okay, so first one was in the restaurant business, then I was in the auto business, now I'm in the school business. But it was in the restaurant business, and my first restaurant tour duty was with Burger King, the fast food joint. Okay, and I don't go to Burger King very often anymore now. It's just, but by the time I left Burger King, about the only thing I could handle eating there was either a plain chicken sandwich or the plain hamburger. That was it. I wouldn't, none of the other. I mean, I have not eaten, I think I've eaten one Whopper, the big sandwich. I've eaten one Whopper since I've left Burger King in my life, and that was because somebody ordered it by mistake, and it was in front of me, and I go, here, eat it. Okay, I'll eat it, kind of thing. But it's just, I just couldn't, seeing the same food is like, just the plainest of the plain was all I could eat, and that was it. That was all I ate there. And then I went to work for Baker Square, the pie restaurant. It was Poppin' Fresh Pie, then it was Baker Square, now it's all but disappeared. I mean, it's still around. I mean, there's still some of them, but and all of those pies that were there that you had to choose from, and by the end, the only one I would eat was the pumpkin pie, just because I could eat it with my hand. That's really why. I mean, I like pumpkin pie, don't get me wrong. So I love pumpkin pie. I'm having pumpkin pie today for my birthday. But I love pumpkin pie because I could just pick it up with my hand and eat it. But you can't do that with an apple pie. It kind of makes a mess. I don't know. But eating the same thing or seeing the same food, even in a restaurant, it's like, man, I don't want to eat this again. So but people complain about that. And then he says, let's see. Okay, so the Lord replies, tell the people, in verse 18, tell the people, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow when you will eat meat. The Lord heard you when you wailed. If only we had meat to eat. We were better off in Egypt. Now the Lord will give you meat and you will eat it. You will not eat it for just 1 day or 2 days or 5 days or 10 or 20 days, but for a whole month until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it because you have rejected the Lord who was among you and have waited for him before him, saying, why did we ever leave? It's interesting. A number of times through Numbers they say this, why did we ever leave Egypt? Kind of thing. So again, there's this big picture of a relationship with God throughout the book of Numbers where we can see this is just like, how do we do this? Oh yeah, I'm walking close to the Lord on Monday and Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, it's like, well, things were so good on Sunday before I started walking with the Lord. I just remember those days before I had a relationship. I used to be able to do this, that. Maybe with your parents, my dad used to talk about, every once in a while he would say, before we had you kids, we used to have pretzels around the house and they'd last, That was my dad's biggest complaint about his kids, was how much we ate, kind of thing. He must have been talking about my brother, because I was all never. But that may or may not be true. But, you know, you reach a certain age and you forget what's right or not. But yeah, so the Lord provides quail. Aaron and Miriam revolt in chapter 12. Okay, they start questioning him. It's, you know, and you think about it, Aaron and Miriam are both older than Moses. Okay, and so it's their little brother, kind of. So, you know, if you have a little brother, you can imagine how, you know, as I understand it, that, you know, that older brothers typically don't like being under the control of their younger brothers. Okay, and I have a younger brother, and I cannot imagine in my life working for my younger brother. I just can't. You know, I know some people do it. Again, it's a personal flaw in my own life. I mean, do any of you work for your younger brother? Okay, you know, I just cannot. Personally, I just cannot imagine it. But this is their younger brother, and now suddenly he's the one calling all the shots. And they're like, hey, you know what? We're the same family. We're the same bloodline. Serve the same God. Why don't we, you know, let us have a piece of the action? And this is where, you know, Moses in chapter 12, Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife, for he had married a Cushite. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses, they asked? Hasn't he also spoken through us? And the Lord heard this. Now in verse 3, now Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. If you've ever heard the expression, Moses, the meekest, the King James translates this as the meekest man on the earth. This is what that passage is. At once the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, come to the tent of meeting, all three of you. Then the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud. He stood at the entrance of the tent, summoned Aaron and Miriam. When the two of them stepped forward, the Lord said, listen to my words, and this is where he just gives it to them. So you know what? I'm the one in charge, right? Moses is just my mouthpiece. I'm the one in charge. And the result of that is Miriam gets leprosy, like bad leprosy, which made her like a pariah. Like kick her out of the camp. You can't be in the camp at all. So this is like, I mean, this is Moses. The inner circle here is rebelling, and the Lord is stepping in, and going, listen, you need to know who's in control here. You need to know who's in control. I'm in control. And then Moses, please God, verse 13, please God, heal her. So that story is in here. Exploring Canaan in chapter 13. This is where the spies go in, and where Moses and where Joshua and Caleb, they all come in. They all say it's great. It's everything we could imagine. It's everything we could imagine. Okay, but 10 of them come back and go, you know, there's the people in there. They're big. They're like really big. Okay, there's the Nephilim, and there's you know, these supposed giants are in the land, and there's a big guns and a lot of weapons, and there's no way we're going to win against these guys, kind of thing. And only two, Joshua and Caleb, say you can't. And again, you talked about it in the video, but this is that story where they got all this way. They came all this way. It's been like a year now, and they come all this way, and they say there is no way we're going to go into that land. And then they start to they create this rebellion. So they're going to go back to Egypt. And you can think about this plan. Think about that. I mean, think about this plan. They're going to kind of walk back to Egypt and go, hey, Egypt, sorry, but we're back. Now, you know, do you think Egypt is really going to be happy to see them? Oh, come on in. Yeah, come on back in. Yeah, well, listen, we'll work together this time. I mean, Egypt has already lost like a large portion of its army in the Red Sea. Do you think they're going to be happy to see the Jews come back? I mean, how are they going to get over the Red Sea? You know, I don't know how that's going to happen. But they're going to go back to Israel, and so the Lord, the Lord comes down and says, "Look, you know, that's not going to happen. The people rebel. They're going to stone." Then the glory in chapter 14, verse 10. Then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the Israelites, the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me in spite of all the signs I have performed among them? Okay, no, kind of, this could be one of the disciples. This could be Jesus talking near the end of his life. All the signs I performed, you still don't believe. Or you think of the Jews in Jesus' time. If you just give us a sign, just give us a sign. How many signs is it going to take here? And so there's several plagues that come around, and this is one of them. But then I like how they put it, that the Lord pretty much grants their request. He says, okay, all of you guys who are rebelling, I'm going to answer your prayer. You are not going to enter the promised land. You don't want to go into the promised land? I'm not going to make you. Which I think is kind of interesting. If you think about it, there's a lesson there. That, the Lord has this great promise, and the Lord has a great plan, that this is a great way for you to serve him, and you say, you know what, I don't really want to do that. Like, okay. Fine, take second best, take third best, take fourth best. Up to you. I'm not gonna force you. I'm gonna force you to do this. Kind of thing. So you've got exploring Canaan, and then 40 years in the wilderness, wandering through the wilderness. So again, this is a get up and move for a while and run the land down, get up, move some more. 40 years, that's a long time. Okay, that's a long time to be wandering. I'm saying that 40 years ago would have been 1980 something, 86, right? Is that 40 years ago? Yeah, 40 years ago would be 1986. That's a long time to be wandering around in the wilderness. There's the bronze snake in chapter 21, and it's interesting that a lot of these stories come up later on. But the bronze snake, so people are grumbling again, and so the Lord sends snakes to bite people, and he says to Moses, well, make a snake and make a bronze snake. Now, what's interesting, if you think about the story, so there's snakes on the ground, right, and they're biting people, and the people are in pain, they're sick, they're dying to death, and the Lord says, make a bronze snake, okay? That takes some time. Well, we don't often think about that, but that takes some time. While, so the people are there, you've got this snake bite, it's getting worse, and don't worry, I got your thing. And so he takes the snake, wraps it around this thing, and puts it up and says, all right, just look at this. If you look at the snake, you'll be healed, right? So again, nobody has to look at the snake. Nobody has to. You could say, no, I don't believe Moses. I am not falling for that. I'm going to just stay here and, fix it by myself, kind of thing. And I always think of that old hymn, Look and Live. Remember, there's a lesson from the Lord, how to live. Look and live, my brother, live. Look to Jesus now. And so when, there's two interesting things about this snake, this bronze snake. Okay, so he gets this bronze snake, and people look at it, and they live, right? And so we're done with it. Well, you may not know this, but they don't get rid of the snake. They don't get rid of the bronze snake. They put it somewhere. Maybe they pack it in the stuff with the tabernacle. They carry the snake with them. And one of the things that we read in 2 Kings chapter 18 about Hezekiah, and I'll just find this passage. One of the things about Hezekiah, 2 Kings 18, talking about what in the third year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. Now, Hezekiah is one of the great kings of Israel. Okay, one of the great ones. His mother's name was Abijah, daughter of Zechariah. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David has done. He removed the high places, smashed the sacred stone, and cut down the Asherah poles. He broke into pieces the bronze snake Moses had made, for up to that time the Israelites had been burning incense to it. Okay, so this became an idol in and of itself. Okay, and the Israelites kept it. Now, again, it's like one of these things become idols. Why does God, why does Jesus heal in so many different ways? You know, it isn't like every time he heals somebody, he does it the exact same way. I think one of the reasons he does that is because if he had healed the same way every time, people would assume that it's the way he healed is why he healed. Does that make sense? If every time Jesus healed, he patted somebody 3 times on the head and said, you're healed, then nowadays we'd say, oh, all you have to do is pat somebody 3 times on the head. Now, it's bad enough that people still kind of follow through with the things that Jesus did, although I don't hear about anybody spitting in mud and putting in on ice stuff, although that would be interesting. But here's something, this was something that God had used, and it'd be, oh yeah, God used that 200 years ago, 300, I mean, this is several hundred years this bronze snake is still around, kind of thing. But then later on in the book of John, when Jesus Jesus and Nicodemus are talking, and he's saying, trying to explain how it's going to work. Okay, how is this salvation going to work? And he's saying, listen, you remember, and Nicodemus would know this story. He said, you remember how, just like that snake was lifted up in the wilderness, and anybody who looked at it lived. Okay, that's just like that happened. Just with that sort of immediacy, that sort of faith, that sort of miraculousness, that's what's going to happen. So just as a snake was lifted up, so will the Son of Man be lifted up. So this snake, again, this is an example of this story coming back in future times. You had the story of Balaam. Three chapters go to the story of Balaam. And Balaam becomes important later on, because you have the heresy of Balaam and all that in later prophecies. But Balaam is just an interesting story. This is where you have the donkey, the talking donkey, where the angel is sent to kill Balaam, kind of thing. But you have, what's interesting here is kind of the extent, the effect that the Israelites are having on people around them. Okay, so Moab recognizes that Israel's a threat. Yeah. And so they say, okay, we gotta get them, we can't defeat them physically. We need to defeat them spiritually. We need to go into the other dimension to get them to, and they bring this guy Balaam, and they say, okay, go out there, go out there and curse it. Go, just get out there and do your thing. And God is protecting them kind of as a witness to the king of Balaam, or the king of Moab, Balak, right? Balak is the king, Balaam is the, to say, and here God is protecting. So the people of Israel don't know this is going on, right? So this is kind of a story that we find out later. People of Israel don't know this is going on, but the God protects the nation even from this kind of interference, and blesses them in the end. Now there is a thing. I don't have it on the thing. So what Moab does, and this causes another thing, is he sends the Moab women into there. This is in Numbers. He says, okay, women go in there and seduce the men, basically, and get them to marry you and intermarry with them. And so that works. Okay, men, but that works. And so you've got all of these Moabite women are in there, and they've grabbed these Jewish guys for husbands, and they're okay, this is great. Now we're going to kind of intermarry with them, and then that gets judged later on. Everyone who is part of this gets taken out as well. And then finally, at the end, you have the succession of Joshua, kind of that next generation deal with next generation leadership for them. But the big picture, if you think about numbers, you've got this generation, this lifetime story of people literally walking with the Lord, and the rebellions and the fights and the gripes and the faithfulness of God throughout all of it. That every time they come up with another reason, if we only had water, if we only had food, if we only had meat, we can't go in there, we can go back, God is still faithful, because he made a promise to Moses that I'm going to use these people, that I'm going to give you this promise that was made to Abraham, and it was repeated to Moses, repeated to the people, I'm gonna get you into the land. Okay, and then what are you gonna do with it once you get there? And this is kind of like what Pastor Jared was talking about. You know, once they get into the land, it doesn't work out. Okay, you still have a similar kind of process, but you still see God being faithful through this whole event. Okay, any questions?
You skipped Moses struck the rock instead of speaking to it.
Oh, yes. Moses strikes the rock instead of speaking to it. That's in chapter 20. So twice Moses provides water from a rock. Okay, and the second time, God says, go out there and speak to the rock and bring water. And then Moses is upset at this point. And can you blame him? I mean, seriously, you know, it's because Moses is like 100 years old at this point. And I gotta imagine, when you're 100 years old, your patience is smooth. Just, I'm not 100 years old, but my patience, it's not what it used to be. I'm just saying. Yeah, right? And Moses is like, seriously, again? Kind of, you know. And so he's, as he put it, the Lord says, go out there and speak to the rock. Speak to the rock. And instead, Moses goes out there and tells the people, we have to do this. And Moses is taking credit for this, and he strikes the rock twice. Now, what's interesting is that the Lord still allows water to come out. Okay, because the people are still thirsty. They still need water. But he makes it clear that, okay, you know what? You did the right thing in the wrong way. Okay, not the way I told you. And so your punishment is, you know, you set yourself up as the one providing the water, and you're not. So it isn't just a matter of he mixed up the instructions. He's taking credit for it. Okay, when it's like Moses isn't the one doing this. And so God tells Moses, well, you know what? You're not going to get into the promised land either, kind of thing. He does see the promised land near the end. We'll talk about this next week when we talk about Deuteronomy. He does see the promised land. He goes up to a hill and look, you can see the promised land, where your people are going to go, and you're just going to trust me that I'll get you there. But that's getting ahead of Deuteronomy.
I got it.
Oh, right.
Yes.